Do you have any idea what the best-selling cars in Europe are? Well, according to Autocar magazine, they would be the Tesla Model Y, the Dacia Sandero, and the Volkswagen T-Roc. Now, here in the United States, you're probably not going to be too surprised to find out that the three top-selling cars are actually trucks. The Dodge Ram pickup truck, the Chevy Silverado, and of course, the Ford F-150. I mean, come on, are you really that surprised? So it is true that we Americans like things big. And I know that Ryan F9 thinks I am out there killing people with the big grill and high bumper on my Toyota Tacoma pickup truck. And I probably am killing the environment as well. But it's very practical. When I want to go to the big box store on the weekend and grab some stuff for some home repair projects, well, it's fantastic. It is also very comfortable, and honestly, it's safer for me and my wife to drive around in. On the other hand, the average European, well, they're more practical. They like smaller cars that get better gas mileage and are easy to handle on the tighter road systems that you're going to find in most European cities. Now, I have not had the pleasure of riding in Europe. I hope to be able to get over there someday and enjoy the beautiful culture and scenery that I have seen online. But I do have a lot of viewers from the UK and from Europe and Australia that comment and tell me that they're amazed with some of the differences that they find between how they ride motorcycles and the motorcycles that they choose versus what we choose and how we ride here in the United States. So I thought it would be fun to maybe look at some of those differences. So first, let's talk about landmass. Right, in Europe, there is 3.93 million square miles of land, or 10.18 million square kilometers. That makes Europe about 20% larger than the United States. Now, here in the US, we have 3.8 million square miles, or 9.15 million cubic kilometers. Now, of course, to get to Alaska, right, our 49th state, right, you have to cross through Canada. So if we add Canada into the land mass that we can cover here in North America, well, you would add 3.9 million square miles. So both the US and Canada together are about 7.7 million square miles. The population of Europe is 742 million people. Here in the United States, we have about 338 million people, so Europe is about twice as dense as the United States. Even if we add in the 38 million people of Canada, well, Europe has a lot more people than we do here in North America. So let's dig into motorcycle sales. In Europe, there are 38 countries that make up that landmass that we were talking about, and there was 2.56 million motorcycles sold in 2023, and that is up about 24.2% from the previous year. So the motorcycles that are selling, well, they include Honda at about 15.4%, Yamaha at 10.9%, BMW at 6.7%, Piaggio at 5.4%, Kawasaki at 4.1%. And something that I found really interesting was that there was an other category making up 45% of the overall sales in Europe. Now, each of those motorcycles in that category sold less than 2% of the overall total. And they would include things like Harley Davidson and Indian. Of all of those motorcycles sold, about 1.6 million were on-road bikes, just under a million off-road bikes and scooters, about 0.35 million. In contrast, here in the United States, we sold about 554,000 motorcycles. That was down, well, about just under 0.5%, but it was the fourth year in a row that we were over 500,000 motorcycles sold. So the brands that are typically sold would be Harley Davidson at 20.5%, Honda at 19.9%, Yamaha at 12.5%, Kawasaki at 11.7%, Suzuki 5.2%, BMW at 3.1%. And as in Europe, there was a large percentage that were sold by, quote, other manufacturers. In this case, in the United States, that's about 27% of all motorcycles are sold in that other category. And this would include brands like Indian, Triumph, Ducati, and Royal Enfield. Now, I think something of note here is that Honda is now on par with Harley Davidson. In fact, some sources say that Honda has now passed Harley Davidson, is now the #1 selling brand in the United States. Now, whether they are or not, well, it looks like they're going to be pretty darn soon. Here in the United States, motorcycle sales are about a $7 billion industry, with the largest bulk being road bikes. On-road bikes make up about 85% of the overall total, with off-road about 11% and scooters at 2%. Now let's talk about roads for a minute. Here in the United States, we are really a very young country. We have been around less than 300 years. But over in Europe, civilization is, well, thousands of years old. The city of Paris is more than 2,000 years old. So given this age, the roads in Europe are naturally going to be smaller. And from what I've been told, well, they typically aren't in as good a shape as most of the roads here in the United States. Although if you drove around Massachusetts here, you wouldn't think that. In Europe, the motorcycle has become a valuable part of the transportation infrastructure, with, from what I read, about 20% of those who are commuting every day doing so on motorcycle. Here in the United States, well, that number is less than a percent. It's actually 0.1% of the people here in the United States commute by motorcycle, or about 175,000 of the 129 million people that commute every day on U.S. roads. So we Americans tend to buy motorcycles for recreational purposes, not for transportation. So we often go for those big 800 and 900 pound touring cruisers that we can get out and ride in the country somewhere. In contrast, Europeans, well, they're taking smaller bikes and scooters in those tighter roads that make up most of those older cities. Now, there is one thing that I know some people are going to point out that Europeans are able to do that we cannot do in most states here in the U.S., and that is lane splitting or filtering. And I know that those same people that would point this out are going to tell me that if we could only do this and have a universal law for lane splitting, that we would have many more riders that would go out, purchase a motorcycle, and use it to commute on. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm going to say that that's just a bunch of wishful thinking. I mean, we have a state here that has been practicing lane splitting, well, at least since the 1960s, so that's about 60 years. And that state, on a per capita basis, ranks 35th out of 50, right, in the number of motorcycles owned. Also, if you look at the numbers, the people who are actually using their motorcycles to commute and taking advantage of that lane splitting laws, well, they're actually pretty small. If we take a look at the number of people who commute on a daily basis just in Los Angeles County, well, that number is almost 4 million people that are commuting by car, truck, or some other kind of roadworthy vehicle. Now, the numbers of people that are using motorcycles to commute, well, since 2019, we actually don't know how many that is, because they were so small in number that they decided to lump them in with people who are using taxi cabs, for example. The last number that we had was that somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,800 people on a daily basis, right, were commuting in 2018 by using the motorcycle. When you do the math, that comes out to 0.18% of the people who are using other kind of vehicles to commute. So if over the last 60 years, lane splitting and filtering has not been able to appreciably increase the numbers in California, what makes us think it's going to do it anywhere else? So now let's talk about licensing requirements, because from what I'm told from my viewers and what I've been able to read, the licensing requirements are much more stringent in Europe than they are here in the United States. In fact, they have a tiered licensing structure, whereas when you first get your license, right, as a 16-year-old, for example, you are limited in the size and the horsepower of your motorcycle. And you have to go back and retest, right, before you can move up in size. So on the other hand, here in the United States, when you take your MSF course to get your license, if you're a 16-year-old, well, you're going to pass it on a 250cc motorcycle, but you can go out immediately and purchase yourself a 150, 200 horsepower motorcycle, or one that weighs 800 or 900 pounds, and nobody's going to stop you. So I guess the question is, do these more stringent requirements in Europe make better riders? And probably they do. All right, one of the criticisms of the MSF courses here is that they are not producing competent, skilled riders, right? They're getting people through the system so they can go out and purchase a motorcycle and make money for the dealers and the manufacturers. Right, and that's why many manufacturers and, of course, the dealer organizations here in the United States have been steadfast against tiered licensing systems, because they think that it's going to reduce sales. However, let me point out that in Europe, again, they sell a lot more motorcycles than we do. Right, so I don't know that these more stringent requirements has actually reduced ridership. Now, honestly, I don't have a good solution for this battle between wanting to allow people to be free and make their own choices and helping to keep people safer. But I do think it's probably something we should be talking about. Which I guess brings me to talking about attitude, because we Americans do tend to value our freedom, our ability to make choices for ourselves. So from what I understand, in Europe, you are required to wear a helmet that meets ECE 22.05 standards. Here in the United States, however, there are only 17 states that have universal helmet laws. That means everybody riding a motorcycle has to wear a helmet. 30 additional states have laws that require people usually under 18 years of age to wear a helmet, but adults, there is no restriction. And there are 3 states that have no helmet laws whatsoever. So as I said, we Americans value our freedom of choice. And even the largest lobbying group for motorcyclists here in the United States is steadfast against helmet laws, right? And they constantly lobby each state not to make more stringent laws. Now, personally, I'm an ATGAT guy. I wear my gear. I'm going to wear my helmet all the time, no matter what the laws are. However, I do think other people should be allowed to make different choices than I do. Again, it's part of the American way, even if I think those choices are poor ones. As much as we American riders would like it to be different, the motorcycle here in the US is not likely to become a big part of the transportation infrastructure anytime soon. Our country is just built on cars and for cars. And let's be honest, we Americans like things comfortable and easy. Right, there aren't very many of us that are likely to jump on that bike and go down to the store when you got to put your gear on, got to put your helmet on. It might be raining or it might be cold. Again, just most people aren't going to do that. It's much easier to go in and turn that key in your car and sit in a big, comfy, heated or air-conditioned space. So we motorcycle riders here in the US are rare. And personally, I kind of like that. I like being the oddball out there. I mean, sure, it does mean that I have to watch out for crazy drivers who aren't used to seeing me on the road, but the risks are far outweighed by the benefits that I get from riding. So I'm just going to keep doing it. I'm going to keep using my skill and my common sense to keep myself as safe as possible out there and enjoying riding my bike. All right, guys, keep riding safe out there and keep squeezing your lemon.